Welcome back to the Ali Bond Show, unfiltered, uncensored. And coming in today, a really special guest from the UK, Perry Power. Perry's an author. He's a courageous storyteller, having survived a childhood of sexual abuse. He's now helping others share their stories and regain their power. Perry has transformed his pain into purpose. He's now on the pathway to releasing his film, It Ends With Me. So great to have you here, Perry, on the Ali Bond Show. So would love to start back to where it all began, and back in childhood, because I guess your childhood has shaped who you've become today. So can we go back to childhood and talk me through that journey, where it started?
Yeah. Well, it started at my first ever memory, which was I was sitting in front of a TV. And I don't remember what was on, but I remember watching something, and I remember sort of thinking and feeling like I wanted to be on it. And that memory's always stayed with me, because I remember being a kid and I didn't even know what acting was. I didn't really know what a TV was. I didn't know what TV shows was, but I remember watching the TV and like, oh, I'd like to be on that. Right. And that was my first ever memory. And that will become a bit more sort of obvious why I'm bringing that up, the sort of as we explore the story. But my sort of next-ish kind of memory was when I was in the bath and my dad was in the hallway, and I remember I was crying and I was upset, and he had essentially just said to me that my mother, his girlfriend, long-term girlfriend, partner, has just left, and he doesn't know when she's coming back. And I remember as a kid being confused. I was 4 or 5 years old, and I was very confused, and part of me thought it was my fault and his mum left because of me, and my dad was furious, and then that kind of started this journey of just me and my dad. My dad raised me. My stepmom, she had her part to play. My auntie, who's like a third mum to me, she had her part to play, but it was predominantly just me and my dad for quite some time. It really kind of felt like forever until things took a bit of a turn. But yeah, it was just me and my dad for a while, and then it's interesting because coming to the main sort of topic as to why I'm on here and why I do what I do now, which is about abuse and helping survivors to find their voice, and kind of why I feel like I've been put on this planet, which is to give a voice to those who've been silenced. That's because I myself was silenced when I was 11 years old, and the person who silenced me was, of all people, my dad. And he silenced me because that day I was at my nan's house, and I was there, and it was me, it was my nan, it was my step-granddad, and my stepmom was there. And what essentially happened was I was sitting on his lap and a blanket was over me. We were both watching TV. And so this is in the living room, right? So imagine we've got one sofa, then we have a coffee table and another sofa. So if you sit on a sofa, you're looking to your right or to your left, depending on what sofa you're sitting on. You're watching TV. Now, my stepmom is sitting on the sofa opposite us, watching the TV. And out the corner of her eye, my step-granddad used to love smoking rolled-up cigarettes, and he had his hand or his arm over the arm of the sofa with the cigarette between his fingers. And we were watching TV. And at the corner of her eye, she sees him drop the cigarette onto the floor. And she doesn't take much notice. She assumes that he's going to lean down and pick it up. But he doesn't as time goes on. And she's like, why is he not picking up the cigarette? She sort of looks down and inspects and then looks up, and then she carries on looking at us, and then she sees movements between my legs under the blanket.
Oh, gosh.
And she sort of like stands up, like not knowing what to do. The hairs on the back of her neck are standing up. And then she then leaves, goes into the kitchen, tries to figure out what should be the next step to take. She then just calls my name to like bring me into the kitchen to remove me from that situation. And I don't know what, because I'll tell you in a second, but she then took me home, tells my dad, because I think because she was my stepmom, she's like, well, the dad, his father, the blood, does the discipline or does the control and does the parenting. So she's like, I'll leave that to Andy. So she takes me home, and then my dad confronts me rather than has a conversation with me. He confronts me and demands for me to tell him what had happened.
So what was that feeling
And
like for you as a young boy
well,
being confronted after that by your dad?
I remember it's very like that whole episode I just told you there. I don't remember any of it. That story comes from my stepmom's mouth. And my dad confronted me in the kitchen. I remember like 2 vivid snippets from it. You know, I don't remember that much. I remember how I felt. I remember feeling confused because I had no idea what on earth this reaction was from my dad. Because at that time, my step granddad was like the hero of my story. He, you know, he would take me to the pub and let me drink ale when the barman wasn't watching. He would give me chalk ices when my dad said no. So he positioned himself to be that cool granddad. So, you know, sexual abuse or like the whole thing just wasn't in my realm. So therefore, I didn't really see what the big problem was that caused this reaction for my dad. For him to say to me, "You're not going around there anymore. You're never going to see him again." Right? And then what happened is it's interesting paradox that my step granddad, who should have been the villain of the story, he was the hero. My dad became the villain of the story, right? Because he says that you can't see him anymore, and you need to keep this to yourself. Don't tell anyone. Don't go tell your mother. Don't go to school. Tell your friends. That's it. Zip it. And that was the start of an 11 or 12-year silence.
And so, the silence period during that time, were you becoming more consciously aware of what had happened? Was there resentment towards your dad, and how was that all working in your own mind through those years? Because it's a lot to, I guess, have a mum walk out and then have that happen. And yeah, what were the days like, or is it just a haze?
Looking back at the years growing up as a teenager, I would say there were some snippets, but we're talking predominantly. The abuse that I went through wasn't necessarily this sort of big thing I was carrying on my shoulders, and it's going to be the death of me, and all I want to do is speak about it. There'll be snippets where it would come up if it was relevant, if I saw something in the news, like that type of thing. The main issues I had was my father being my father, so daddy issues. That was like now, if I got any type of problems, I say it's my daddy issues. It's not the issues from abuse. You know, it's a whole different ball game. And obviously as well, my mum walking out when I was 5, and I would only see her once a year, twice if I was lucky, for a considerable amount of time. Then it shifted towards once a month and then once every other week. But that's pretty much, you know, my dad was a Cockney geezer. He was an hard man, you know, and he was a proud man, and there's lots of good qualities about my dad, some not so good, but I wanted to be like my dad as a man, as a masculine man, you know, because I grew up in an area that was quite rough, and I wanted to be like my dad, but I'm not a fighter, I'm a lover. You know, my dad, he was a fighter, and so that was a very, very interesting thing, to be in his shadow, wanting to be like him, but in this sort of internal conflict of, but I don't want to be like him at the same time. I don't want to be doing that. So that growing up as a teenager forced me to wear these masks of how I should be in social settings, you know, and how I should be around girls, how I should be around boys, how I should be, you know, all these different masks, as Lewis Howes in his book, Mask of Masculinity, talks about it. That very much was my lifestyle growing up, for sure.
And so there's always a breaking moment of I guess when the silence ends. And so, are you happy to share your story about when the silence and the dam broke, and you were able to share your story?
Yeah. I say that the silence that I broke happened in 3 stages, and I need to give context before that, which is, so I was living at home until I was about 19. I moved out of home, traveling around Australia with my ex-partner, and then came back and wanted to make it as an actor, tried the traditional path of having an agent, doing the commercials to try and be seen, the path that I hated. And I did it to the point where I'm like, I need to find a different path because I'm not working in a call center. I need to figure out what to do. Like, I want to act, but I know I'm going to get there, but I don't know how, and it's not going to follow the traditional path. So, and I'm a big believer in the universe. Like, universe, you're going to guide me to where I need to go. Like, take over, please. And I was like, okay, well, the biggest reason why people follow artistic paths, but then they fall off that path, is usually because of a lack of finances, because real world problems come in. They've got to pay rent. If they have kids, you've got to put food on the table, and can't make money from art today. So then they take up a job, and then they start to drift over time. And I didn't want that to happen to me. So I went into business. I was like, well, should I start a business and maybe finance and create my own sort of financial freedom so then I can act? Thought I'd be a millionaire in a year, and that didn't happen. And, it took me, that was 19, it took me 8 years to find my thing. 8 years to find my thing. And the only reason I stuck at it for so long was for acting. I'm like, because if I quit this, it's not going to happen. Was the story that I was telling myself. And throughout this whole time, I wasn't living at home, and behind the scenes, my dad and his attachment to alcohol got worse and worse and worse and worse. And he would come around my house, and he was always drunk, always had an argument with mum. And I remember this one time where our relationship is like, it got so toxic, Ali, it was unbelievable. He would, like, just, if I didn't text him for 5 minutes, he would say, "Who do you think you are?" Like, acting as if you got a life. Like, he became very, 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 very spiteful. And that took a huge toll on me. And I remember the last time he came to my house, he left, and I texted him and I said, "Why are you drinking so much?" And me, you don't confront my dad. You don't confront him whatsoever. So me saying, "Why are you drinking so much?" questioning him was huge. I couldn't do it to his face. There was no way. I had to do it via text. And then he replied back, and all he said was to fight away the demons. And I remember when I read that, I was like, what are you talking about? What demons are you on about? I just couldn't compute it then. And then it was maybe a month later, it wasn't that long, I very randomly, one day in the morning, I get a text from my dad, and he says, I've had a rough night's sleep, I could barely breathe. No, I had a rough night's sleep, I had a pain in my stomach, is what he said. And I remember reading it, and at that point, my dad tried everything to get my attention, and, I had to do a lot of work on guilt, on the guilt that comes with this, and I think a lot of people will be able to resonate when they lose someone, they look at all the things that they should have done differently, And I remember reading that text, I'm like, he's just attention seeking, and didn't respond back to it. I did respond many hours later, because I felt bad. I was like, what is it, hay fever? Like, just something stupid, and I knew it wasn't that. He didn't reply back. And then I get two texts, 2 photos from my brother. And one was an ambulance van outside the house, the family house.
Oh,
and then the other one, was that?
I just said, oh gosh.
Yeah. One, that's what I was like, oh gosh. That was literally my reaction. I was like, an ambulance van outside the house, and the other one was him on the bed with a paramedic standing next to him. So I'm like calling up, and my stepmom says, he shouldn't have sent you those messages. Like, you don't need to be alarmed. It's fine. And I said, what's wrong? And this was June the 1st, 2017. Now, January, so a few months prior to that, at the beginning of the year, he just become a diabetic. So he was an alcoholic. He was high blood pressure. So he had high blood pressure tablets. He then became a diabetic. And then she said, his blood levels are off. So the paramedics are going to take him down to the hospital to even him out. Right? Sort him out over there. I said, okay. She goes, yeah, we're just going to finish up eating our dinner. We've got to pick him up in about an hour or so. I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, no worries. Hang up the phone, and then maybe an hour later, 45 minutes later, it's my mum ringing. But my brother, when I answered, my brother, and he says, Dad's gone. And I'm like, what do you mean he's gone? He's like, he's gone. I was like, yeah, what do you mean he's gone? He's like, he's dead. And I think I blacked out. I think I slid off the sofa, like, what, crazy. And completely in denial. I thought it was all one big sick joke. I thought, this is my dad. You see it in a TV show, someone like the main character losing someone. But when it happens to you, it's just like, it's just crazy. Still now, me and my dad used to have this running joke, and a lot of big Elvis fans out there will have this running joke that Elvis is still alive and he lives in Kalamazoo in America, and undercover, and like witness protection. And, I'm always convinced that my dad's just out there in Kalamazoo with Elvis, just drinking up. That's like how I see my dad now, And when I come back, and a few months have passed, so now I don't have my dad in my life in good and bad ways. And I go onto my laptop once, I come home from training a client, and I go onto YouTube, and then there was an interview with Lewis Howes, and there was Lewis and Ellen DeGeneres, and then he had a different interview with Patrick Bet-David, and I watched both of them. And that was when he was doing his book tour for Mask of Masculinity. And Patrick says to him, "Why did you write your book? Like, this is crazy. Why'd you write it?" And he said, "Because I was raped as a kid." You know, I think he said by a neighbor or someone, I can't remember exactly who. He said, "But I grew up wearing all these different masks in order to fit in, you know, as a man." And he just said that, and it was the first time for I think a mixture of timing, relevance, a whole host of things. Universe saying it's time, Perry, where it just hit me. I'm like, dude, you haven't confronted this part of your story since your dad told you to stay silent. You know, now's the time to confront this. And I remember like that voice in my head. And I remember like, what do I do now? And you know, now this long-winded way of coming back now to your question. That was the first time I broke my silence. I was like, what do I do? Well, you need to tell someone. Like, you need to do that. It's the only answer that came to me. So I waited for my girlfriend at the time to come home from the pub from work, and we went out for a walk. And I don't remember a single word that I said, not a single word. But I remember how I felt. I felt freezing cold. I felt butt naked. I think it's the Brene Brown vulnerability is like standing outside butt naked and everyone is just staring at you. For me, that felt great. You know, it doesn't. But then with that, it's like. It's, I don't remember a single thing. Luckily, she welcomed me, my story, my truth with open arms. And so I had a good attachment, a positive attachment with sharing my truth. But yeah, that was the first time. And then I broke it again a second time at a business mastermind conference where there was like 6 or 7 personal trainers there. And I shared it to them. That was a couple of months later. Then on a drive home from that event, I'm driving home and like, right, Perry, you told your missus a couple of months ago. You just told 6 strangers, both times positive experience. You need to now get this off your chest in a big way. Like, you just need to detach it from yourself and just put it out there. And this whole dialogue was going on in my head driving home. I'm like, okay, but how? How do I do that? Well, you're into your fitness. You use Facebook a lot. I didn't use Instagram back then. You use Facebook a lot. So, and this is the beginning of 2018. Just do a video. I'm like, all right, fine, I'll do a video. I'll do it when I get home. You know, that sounds like a good idea. I'll do it when I get home. And then I'm driving, a couple of minutes go by, and then the voice is like, you won't do it when you get home. Because you'll get home, then your missus will be like, oh, how was the event, Perry? And then you're going to go into this full update, and then her friends are there, so you're going to talk to them, and all of a sudden you tell yourself the story as to why you shouldn't do it. And I'm like, oh, fuck. I was like, fine, you're right. And then I just pulled the car over, and then I take my phone out. It took me 7 takes, and then I put the video into Facebook, and that was the end of the story. That's literally what blew me up and got me to where I am today.
Wow. So can I ask you, what were the reactions of the 6 people that you told after your partner? How did they react? I presume that they were primarily, were they a mixture of men and women?
Yeah. There was one girl and then the rest of the guys.
And how did they react?
Funnily enough, it was actually the girl that approached me, and so I'd said it. I was looking down at the floor. Don't remember a single word that I said, but I know what I said at the same time. The theme of what I said, and I looked up when I finished talking. I didn't even look at the personal trainers. I just looked at the 2 coaches who were running the event because James, he was like, thank you so much for sharing, you know, and they said, well, we need to put you in touch with a friend of ours, and they said, you got some healing to do around your dad. I'm like, no shit.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, absolutely. Yeah. And then that was it. Then the first break, the girl, I think I was doing something like making a coffee or whatever, and then the girl came over to me and she was like, thank you so much for sharing that. And then she sort of nudged towards everyone else for me to look. She goes, you just brought us all together. We're all talking now. We're all close. And so that was the second time.
Okay, so a question I have, Perry, is the discrepancy on genders and the maybe percentages of males and females that come forward. Do more females come forward than males, would you say? Or is it similar?
No, I would say, and I don't feel like this by a long shot, more women reach out to me and tell me that they're survivors. By a long shot. Very few men do. However, as time has gone on, especially since I broke my silence, I find that more and more men do reach out to me and tell me, and that let's just say it was 80% women and 20% men. I do think that there is more women compared to men. I mean, I could be wrong. It's an assumption that I have. But what I will say is, I don't think it reflects the exact truth. I think there's a lot of men out there that live in silence, but because of things like masculinity, the way that we should be, and the opinions of others, our egos, we don't say. But as time has gone on, it is getting a bit better.
And so from that point, when you've disclosed it and you've now put a video out into the realms of the universe, was there a moment where you thought, I really need to do some work on myself to work through this trauma and pain? And did you involve an outside party to work with you on that?
No, me personally, and I always really emphasize this because everyone's journey is different. Me personally, I've never identified with healing or healing journey. That's never ever entered my brain. Like, you need to find healing, or this is what you should do for healing. For me, and I think I don't know. If I had to take a guess, I think it's maybe a mixture of my personality gelled in with, I went into personal development when I was 19, and ever since the age of 19, I've always been Perry Power 2.0. Like, who's the version of me that I want to become? And my whole thing is, like, for me, if I keep on focusing on a version of myself that I want to become, a lot of healing will happen as a byproduct of that. Right? And I'm like, if you focus on healing wounds, then you're always going to find wounds to heal, because what you focus on grows. But if I focus on who I want to become, a lot of healing will happen as a byproduct. That's been my journey. That's what's worked for me. But, you know, when I put that video out there, I did that for me. And then all of a sudden, I remember that first message that came through that said, your story's really helped me with my own story. And then that's when I realized, oh, interesting. My story can be for other people.
So then that must have created an avalanche of, I guess, messages coming in from not only people that you knew, but from strangers too. And so was that the pivotal point of looking at writing your story and sharing your story to, I guess, unsilence others?
Yeah, sharing it, yes. The writing of my story only came into the picture 3 years later. So ever since, because when I did that video, and then we had the strangers and like clients and stuff that would see it, then I go around one day to my family house and I'm sitting there with my stepmom, and then she says to me, I watched the video, Perry. And it was in that moment I felt so awkward, because I'm like, oh shit, yeah, of course my family are going to see it. And I didn't even think of that. And I'm just like, what is she going to say? And then she says to me, she goes, I didn't know that the abuse happened more than that one time. I said, what one time? She goes, the time that I caught it. She goes, I felt like I was like a proud mum because I saw it for the first time and stopped it for the last time. And I said, you stopped it, but like it happened. I said, I have so many snippets of the abuse and I don't remember a single thing from that time that you caught it happening. I said, it had been happening prior to that. So that was the first. And then I think it was like the week following or the second week following, I go around to my auntie's house. And then I'm around there and we got me and my auntie, who's my dad's sister, and then my cousin Kelly, who's her daughter, my dad's niece. Now, she is maybe 6 years older than me. I've always known that she was abused too by the same guy.
So right? How did you know him?
Because I think she let my cousin Kelly has, even to this day, bless her heart, it really fucked her up, the trauma, and she's still really, really struggling. And growing up, she used to get heavily bullied. I'd be around her. I remember one time I was walking on the street, she got jumped by a whole group of girls, beating the shit out of, blood everywhere. And I just stood there watching, couldn't do anything. And I was young, like primary school, sort of like young. And, we're like brother and sister. And I don't remember like the first time she had told me, but I just always knew she would never go into any details, but she would always talk about how much she hated Michael, was his name, and she would never call him granddad or step granddad. And so I always known about it, but I would never talk to her about it because she would always just get super uncomfortable whenever it's even brought up. And so I'm sitting there now. My auntie, she's like, I watched a video, Perry. I was like, oh, and then Kelly was like, yeah, she's like, I didn't even know it was going on for you. She's like, I didn't know you were getting abused by him. She goes, if I would have known, I wouldn't be here, so I would have killed him. And she probably would have, like, legit, you know. And then my auntie was like, you know, you weren't the only one that was abused by him. And I said, yeah, I know, Kelly was too. She goes, it wasn't just you two. She goes, it was me and it was your dad.
Oh, wow.
And I remember sitting back in the sofa, and then all of a sudden, all of the dots just connected. Why my dad told me to stay silent, why he became an alcoholic, why he told me to watch the Spotlight film over and over and over again. When I said I haven't watched it, he said, watch it. Why? Because it's all about institutional abuse. And because then I find out that my step-granddad grew up in an island, in a Catholic boarding school in Ireland, where he was abused by priests. And all the reports that come out from the school that he went to, and that school was one of the documentations inside that film. Like, everything just connected about my dad. You know, when I found out that, and when I left the house and I was walking down the steps towards my car, I was like, "This is what I'm doing for the rest of my life. No one is going to drop dead from a heart attack, be an alcoholic, and die before the age of 50 because they're living in silence." And yeah.
And so what did that feel like? Was there a feeling of feeling free, feeling like this is my purpose, and this all makes sense? And was there also a feeling of great sadness for your dad enduring what you had to?
Yeah, 100%. Even now, there's so much sadness. It's you know, I think if we really look at it, I think purpose, especially the type of purpose that we're talking about here with the nature of the topic, I think a lot of sadness is attached to it. And I think it's a sadness that drives the purpose, because it's like, we can't keep on living in a world where this shit happens.
No.
You know, for me, it's the shit that happens within your family. It's the silence that passed down through the generations that causes these illnesses, these deaths. You know, if that silence is broken, you know, I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying that there's a choice, and that's what needs to change.
Did hearing anything from your grandfather change anything in your mind?
Hearing anything from him?
That it happened
from my step-granddad?
That it had happened to him?
Yes, for me.
Yeah.
Now, after my book came out, I was contacted by it's so funny, because after my book came out, and I was like, right, I made a commitment to myself that I was going to reach out to a lot of journalists and try and get the story out there, and there was some success with that. And when I knew that I was about to be posted in some big newspapers here, I was thinking to myself, I said, his family could see this, like my step-granddad's family. Now, you know, we're talking about so he had his own family, which I didn't even know who they were. I met them when I was a child, like once or twice max, but I didn't remember them. And I was thinking, his family's going to see this. They're going to see my story. They might even know I'm talking about him, like what's going to happen there. And I had all these fears coming up, like they might reach out to me, try to sue me for defamation, or try to ask me to take it all down, say I'm talking shit, whatever it is. And I'm like, just park it to one side. You have no idea what's going to happen. And about a week later, I get a message on Facebook, and the first sentence from this person was, "Hi Perry, it's whatever her name is, Michael's daughter." And then I'm like, oh no. Right. And it was a long message, and I put my phone down, like, what's she gonna say? I'm like, listen, if I'm going down, I'm going down swinging. Like, let's go. And so I look at the message, and she's like, the gist of the message was, you got the support of our family because he abused us too.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And that, I was like, holy shit. And me and my cousin met up with her in a park, like in London, not too long after that message, to have a full-on chat from both sides. And she was the one who told me about the school that he went to. She asked me to research it, to have a look at all the reports that came out, and finding out this whole thing. It's not like, it excuses what he done. But for me, I'm a big guy on leading with curiosity, and just try to just gather as many pieces of the puzzle that you can possibly get. And that was just a key puzzle piece that I got. I'm like, okay, well, it's unfortunate that he went down a path that he did, but he did, and
Was he
he's a
alive?
survivor.
Was he alive still when all this came out, or had he passed?
No,
By
he died.
he had.
Yeah, he died a year or two after he stopped with me. He died from a heart attack at work.
Oh wow! So the
Yeah.
abuse within your family crossed multiple generations, and I guess your proof that speaking truth isn't free, and it isn't easy, and I guess you've lost a lot, but it appears that you've also gained an awful lot too, Perry, on your on this journey, I guess, of life. And, the reactions from the wider family from around the globe, did they increase in frequency, volume, and also did it inspire people to step forward and start telling you their own story first because you were a safe place, because you weren't part of their family?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when about 6 months before my book came out, I completely blew up on TikTok. Like, this was like relatively when it come TikTok, and you go on there and it was just full of like young girls doing these dances, like back when it was just that. And I'm like, okay, well, I've been sharing my story a lot, hitting the adults, hitting the people who have been living in silence for like 30, 40 years. I would love for my story to hit those people where it could be happening to them right now, which are the kids. I'm like, shit, these kids ain't gonna know what hit them when they go onto TikTok and, they're expecting to see a dancing video from their friend and they just hit with my story. And I was like, that might be why I need to do it. And then I put my story up on TikTok, and the very first video blew up. My account went to like 120, 30,000 followers. And when that first video popped, that from then to like now, that's when the whole DMs started. When people reach out to me, they'll break their silence to me. Plenty of people are saying, like, I wish that you were the brother that I wish I had, in regards to the person close to me that I can share my story to. And it happened continuously. And then that's what led me to write my book, and the first one, and which I launched in 2021, because I was like, there needs to be another way where I can help people to break their silence and actually maybe give them some actionable steps for them to do it.
So that's where Powerful Books originated. What's your philosophy on writing and owning trauma like sexual abuse?
I think that for anybody who's been through trauma, and if we want to be specific here, sexual trauma, but really it's any type of trauma, writing your story will be the most healing thing you'll ever do. And that will be compared to anything else. And I'll guarantee it for anyone. And I'm not saying you'll get it on the first attempt, but what I will say is that the book, or the finished written story, will be ready when you're ready. And that's a beautiful thing about writing your story, is because it's not just writing your story, it's about who you become in the process of writing your story. It's about every single page that you write, you start to find your voice. And that was a very voice that was taken away from you at a certain stage in your life, as a power that was stripped away from you. Every single word that you write, you're starting to confront your story, because that very story that you're now confronting is the story that you had run away from for so long. That's the power of writing. So
when you were writing your story, were more memories coming back as you were going through that writing process?
I had one new memory, quote unquote, unlocked. Everything that I've written was always there in my brain, but I had a new memory unlocked at that time. And it's always been an interesting piece when I think back on it, because I always say that the abuse that I went through, there's people out there that have gone through sexual abuse that was very, very traumatic for them in the moment. They knew it was wrong. It could have been a painful assault, whatever it is. For me, it wasn't, I don't associate traumatic memories with the abuse. I really associate the trauma from the silence that I lived in after the abuse. And that was just because of how it was set up, how he would do it. And it was like our secret thing, rather than like back away, don't know this is wrong type of thing. But there was this one time, and apparently after talking to my family, they were convinced they'd never let me stay around there because they knew what type of man he was. But then I reminded them this one occasion, like, oh yeah, we did. I don't know why we done that. And there was this one night that I stayed there. And I remember when I was lying in the bed, on my side, staring towards the door. My nan was there, my step granddad was there, and he had his arm around them, both saying goodnight to me. Have a good night's sleep and all that sort of stuff. And I remember just looking at my step granddad as they walked out. I remember just lying there, and I was scared. And I remember thinking to myself, what could happen tonight? Like, I've never been here at night before. Like, so what would happen compared to what goes on during the day with us? And it took me a long time to get to sleep. And yeah, that unlocked for me what's writing.
And so how has this impacted intimacy in your relationships? Has it played a part? Are you triggered at times in intimate moments of what's happened historically?
Is there a TMI on this show?
No, there's no TMI. It's unfiltered and it's uncensored.
Good. Is there any? Right, let me have a think. I know growing up, I had a problem with because I was introduced to sexual things from such a young age. Like now, I'll be fully honest. Now I don't associate love with sex. So like when I have sex with my partner, for me, there's no love whatsoever. It's just play, depending on multiple things. But it's not love for me, and that's something that I'm very aware of, and I'm very conscious of that, and I question it a lot. That I don't have the final answer, but I can assume that's a sort of fragment left over connected to the abuse. And in regards to, I've had so many conversations like this with other people, depending on who the person is, how much details we go into. But like triggers, I know so many people have triggers behind closed doors. Like for me, I don't like to be masturbated, for example, right? Because that's what my granddad used to do to me.
So a trigger.
Yeah. I'm very uncomfortable. Like, it's I don't like flip out. I'm just very uncomfortable. I'm just aware of it, and partner knows. But other than that, I think I'm not. I think I'm okay.
A lot of women do, and men actually do actually link sex and intimacy with love, and so has that impacted on them, and how have they supported you, coped with your history, and are there moments where it really impacts on them?
I think if not concrete black and white, because of my lack of love and intimacy and sex is created a sort of like this conflict. I haven't had that. What I have had because of that was being very open and honest about each other's love languages and making sure that at least each other's love languages are met. So like mine is quality time. Like I said, I don't get any love from sex, but I get love from quality time. And for me, I get more love sitting on a sofa or just like with the partner or just like going for a walk with the partner than I would from sex. Whereas I know my partner is, like a lot of women, well, not all women, but I know my partner is gets a lot of love from that, and it's just a work in progress. But like I said, I think for me, and I think a lot of people listening, is that as long as a lot of conversation is had around love languages, I think at least you're trying to work on different areas.
Have you thought about about creating a family, and if so, are you inspired to become a dad one day?
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely.
And so, do you think that part of the model of the dad that you're creating in your mind is the opposite of what you've had, or are there parts of your dad and your stepdad that you still do honour and would want that as part of who you become when you are a dad? Because it's such a layered life that you've had, I guess.
Yeah. I think that there are definitely components of my dad. My dad had a fantastic sense of humour, and
you've inherited that.
Laugh a lot, and
you've inherited his humour, by the way. You've inherited his humour, yes, for sure.
Yes, I've inherited my dad's humour of laughing a lot, and I've inherited my mum's humour of very dark humour. And so it's a great combination. And my dad's sort of way of being, my dad was a hard worker. He put his family first before beyond anything else. Like, there's a lots of qualities of my dad that I have in me that I definitely want to pass on. And there's some qualities of my dad, like my dad, my dad always said that. So my nan was an alcoholic. My step granddad were alcoholics. Both of them were alcoholics. My dad grew up in that house where he would have to cook them dinner every day because they'll come home drunk from the pub every day. And he's like, I lived in it. He always told me he lived in a house where if he was to go like runner and leave, that they wouldn't be like, where's our son? They'd be like, where's our dinner? And so that's the environment that he grew up in. Like, they wouldn't care where he was. So with me, if I was to ever leave the house, who are you going to see? Who are their parents? What's the address? What time? You come back for this time. If you're a minute late, you're grounded. And I used to be grounded a lot. I'd be sent to my bedroom, and he would take everything away from me. I would just have pen and paper. I wouldn't, depending on the severity, I wouldn't even be able to leave my bedroom to go to the toilet. I would have to shout out and ask permission to leave my bedroom to go to the toilet. And I couldn't speak to my dad. I'd have to write him a letter. We lived in the same house. Very small 2-bed flat, by the way, and no stairs. And, so how my dad enforced like punishment and boundaries. I want to be, he's here. I want to be way over there, with how you do that to kids.
I know you will be. And is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience today?
If anyone is living in silence right now listening to this, and you've heard my story, and you heard me like, well, Perry said that he broke his silence for the first time, he told his partner. That is true, but I always recommend to not follow the path that I took, because I said that she luckily welcomed me with open arms. Luckily, her response was outside my control. So if you're living in silence and you've never spoken a single word of it before, you barely even sat there to think about the story yourself, so it's all really fresh at the forefront of your mind, and then you want to tell someone about it, you're going to have every ounce of you seeking their approval and seeking their validation. You need them to believe you, and we should want that, but you can't guarantee that's the reaction they're going to give you. And if, let's just say they don't, or like, I could have told my partner the story, and she's a lovely person and she wouldn't have shut me down, but maybe she paused to think, God, that's a bombshell. How should I react to this? What should I say? And I then read into that pause. I'm like, oh my God, no, she's thinking I'm an absolute idiot. And it doesn't matter what comes out of her mouth after. I've just said that story, which is the same story I've been telling myself for the last 20 years. So I'm probably going to believe that one over whatever she's going to say now. But that's because I broke my silence to someone on the first time. I recommend that if someone's living in silence, break the silence to yourself first, in as many different ways as possible, rather than telling your partner as step number 1. Make that step number 19, and the first 18 times is you writing a poem, writing a song, writing your story, choreographing a dance piece, go to pottery class and making a plate whilst you're putting the emotions into molding that plate together. Now you have a physical representation of your story. So many different ways. And then eventually, after you've confronted your story and your truth for 18 times, when you tell your partner on step number 19, it's going to be coming from a very different place.
And back to the books, powerful books. That's actually where I first met you, because I was considering writing my own book, and then I got a tad scared about being authentic, and then not being able to actually put in the book parts of my life story that have happened that have been really traumatic, but not wanting to put them in there because of the impact on others, primarily my children. And so Powerful Books is a company that you've founded after writing your own book, and now you're helping people through the process of writing their own life story. And can you talk my audience through what that process looks like? Because I'm sure there'll be plenty of people that are looking at writing their own memoir, and so I'm sure that you'll be able to give us some good tips and where to start, and a little bit about your program.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said something very key there about you want to write your book, but there are components of your story that bring a lot of fear and obstacles that you need to face, which then prevents you from writing in the first place. And that, I think, is a very similar story to a lot of people, because if you've been through abuse or some type of trauma, there are going to be complexities. There are going to be other parties involved, and you're not just dealing with your own life and your own personality, you know, your own decisions, consequences. It's a whole multitude of people. And I'm not taking anything away from that, but that's why. So there's two options inside Powerful Books. You can join and just write your story, like the first story. We're not even talking about publishing a book, because that's not what it's about, right? You're writing your story for you. No one else needs to know about it, because I mentioned this earlier. Who you become whilst writing your story is crazy. Like, who you will become by writing those very truths that you're scared to write, right? The authenticity will just transform you. Once you're at that stage and you're that version of yourself, then you can be like, right, should I publish this, or should I really dial it back in, take all of those things out, because I've gotten what I needed personally out of just writing it down, you know? So that's why there's two ways to, like, inside Powerful Books. You can just write your draft, or you can publish the book. Some people jump straight to publishing the book. Some people were like, no, let me write the first draft first, and then I can upgrade later, type of thing. So that's like kind of how we set it up. And you have like, we've got 3 group calls every week. Everyone gets an accountability partner. There's like a WhatsApp group that people talking all day, every day. And what I will say though is Powerful Books is about more than just writing a book, because when people do publish a book, then it's like, all right, I'm speaking at schools now. I want to do my TEDx talk. I want to start a charity. Like today's call was most of it was talking to Tanya, one of our girls, about starting her charity and how that's actually going to work. You know, because then it's all about because writing your book is just an extension of you sharing your story. There's a million and one ways for you to share your story, and that's a lot about what Powerful Books is about. But when it comes to practical, like, advice, we do have like just word vomit on a piece of paper. Like, if you haven't written anything on a piece of paper, just word vomit. Just get it all out your system. You know, that's it. Just get it done once. And do it in one sitting, not broken over periods of days, because you're just increasing the chances of you not sitting back down again to write. Sit down, at least an hour, right? Just word vomit. That will do you a world of good if no one's done it yet. When it comes to actually writing a book, like, if you, let's just say, for example, you was in our course right now, you would see that you writing a book is way over there. It's like, we're not even coming to that yet, because there's a lot, because otherwise you'll start writing, you're like, writer's block, where do I go from here? What do I do? What's, you know, it's like, well, no, what we need to do first is we need to unravel your story, so you can actually know who you are and what your story is about and how you got to where you are today. Not in a book format, just write your story and we guide you through that. Then it's, what is your message? Why are you here today? What's the message that's been born from your trauma, from your story? What's the message that you want to put out there into the world that can be born everything else? And then, what's the book structure? How are we going to structure this whole book out? How are we going to incorporate the story and the message into it? What's all the chapters? What's the message of each chapter? Now you've got this blueprint to follow. Now it's like, right, now you can start chapter 1 and go on your journey with your accountability partner, with all the calls. So we're very much heavy in steps to follow and the people to keep you accountable, because I'm working on my second book now. It's actually written. I'm just sort of ironing out some of the creases, and it's called Story Medicine. And it's all about the 5 stages of healing that I'm sort of coining, called the witness effect. And it's about witnessing your trauma, right? Witnessing it to yourself, joining a community, right? So you're with people where once you thought you were the only one that was going through it, now you're actually in a group of people like, oh, I'm not on my own. Interesting. And then it's page witnessing, which is actually writing it down, right? And then it's trusted witnessing. So now for the first time, you're actually going to share your story with some other people. And then it's legacy witnessing, which is now you're going to share your story with the world and actually create a legacy and create a movement behind your message. And that's why, but what's the golden nugget out of all that? Writing your story changes everything.
So coming up, you've got something very exciting, and that is your new movie. It ends with me. And so really excited about this next move for you, Perry. And so where are you at with the film?
So we've got a co-producer on board. We're still fundraising at the moment. I'm in talks of getting a director on. It's just chipping away at it.
Yeah.
You know? And this is the first film for Powerful Films, and the whole vision, which is really why Powerful Books was formed in the first place, was to create a flow of true story books that eventually we can turn into true story films. And this is, we've got 20 books published now for Powerful Books, and now I'm like, right, and now I feel like we can start on Powerful Films. And the first film is My Story, It Ends With Me. It's basically about, the message of the film is the uncomfortable silence that thrives in families where the trauma lives, and it's about breaking that silence and creating generational healing. And the goal for It Ends With Me is to raise the money for it, because the tricky thing is, when it comes to films like this, is a gamble for like studios and investors and stuff like that. It's a gamble to put money into this. They want to put money into films where it's like they know it's going to be a huge commercial success and all big known actors inside of it. With this one, it's coming from me, my story, and it's a story about abuse. It's not so basically it's a hard sell, which is why I'm doing it myself, with obviously help along the way. So we've raised a few grand so far, and the goal is to film it, then get it submitted to Cannes, and then get it submitted to the Academy Awards. That's like the North Star.
And so, what's your hope for the audience that watches it one day, that they walk away from watching the film? What would you like them to walk away feeling that they have gained from the film?
Permission to find their voice. Permission to share their story, because very, very quick story. I was in tears today on a call because one of our authors, Bonnie, she published her book Shout It Beautifully, I think like a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. And for the first time last week, she went to a school in Oklahoma, is where she lives. And she spoke at a school. Now, she was shit scared, right? She's in her 60s and she's like, I don't, and she spoke at a school in front of 60 schoolgirls. She finished her talk, and I'm sharing this story because this is exactly what I want the film to do, but on a global scale. She finished her talk to these 60 girls. 4 girls walk up to her after the talk. 4 of them break their silence to Bonnie. Bonnie says, right, will you come with me to the school principal so we can actually do something about this? One of them said, no, I don't want to go anywhere. The 3 of them went with her. These 3, right, were abused by their fathers, all 3.
Wow.
And they went to the school principal. They done a cracking job at taking immediate action. They got social services. I can't remember if that's what they call it in the States, but that's what we call it. And the police. And cutting the story short, that happened last Tuesday. And then last Friday, the mother and one of those girls randomly turn up at Bonnie's house in the afternoon. She's now shit scared. She's like, why are you here? Right? Because, well, why? This is just out of the blue. And so Bonnie invites them in, and the mum starts breaking down. And so what it turned out to be was this girl had a sister. They go back home. The sister says, yes, he's been abusing me too. And the mum's kicked the dad out, getting a divorce, trying to figure out what the next step is to take legally or not. And she says to Bonnie, thank you, you've just saved our family. You just saved the girls' lives. And that's what I want to happen on a global scale, on every single TV, in the cinemas, where people can watch it, and then they can finish watching that film, and they can be like, shit, not just me. Because when I was living in silence, I was like, no one out there has been abused by their granddad. Like, do you know what I mean? No one out, because nobody talks about it. So if nobody talks about it, you feel like you're the only one. Like, people are going to like, no one. But as soon as, like, yeah, my granddad, yeah, my dad, you're like, oh, maybe I can say something.
Do you know the percentage roughly of what victims of sexual abuse actually go through with charging the perpetrators? Because I don't know that a lot of times people are too scared because the process is so taxing on individuals to even get into that court system.
Yeah, I don't have a specific percentage. I know it's disgustingly low. And it's also, yeah, because I'm on a board of a charity here where what we're doing is we're working on building a database. It's like a tool where people who've been through abuse or been through assault, they can anonymously report what they went through, and it gets put into the database. And behind the scenes, AI is looking for similarities in all these submissions.
Okay.
And then and then it looks for clusters. So if there's more than 2 similarities in stories, it clusters them together, and then they get sent to the police or into a middleman to then decide what police department to send this case to. Because with abuse, when there's an abuser, 9 times out of 10 there's more than one person that they're abusing, you know? And when it goes to court, usually insufficient evidence, whether it's because it's historic or because it's just one voice. And what we're trying to say is, well, if there's more than just one voice, that's one way to try and tackle this, so we can try to increase the prosecution rates, which is disgustingly low.
I've got a couple of quick questions for you too, Perry.
Go for it.
What's one thing that you're really proud of about yourself that nobody sees? Because you've got a very public persona, but what's something that you're really proud of that really no one else sees, but maybe you and your partner?
What am I proud of that no one sees? That either says that I'm either very narcissistic because I show it everywhere. I show everything off, or okay, I am proud of my art drawings that I've kept all these years ever since I was a kid. I'm a very good drawer, because I mentioned about how my dad would put me in my bedroom and give me pen and paper. If there's any good that's come out of it, is it forced me to be a good drawer. And all of my drawings I've kept, comic style drawings, and yeah, I'm proud of that.
Did any of those drawings, were they like manifestations of the abuse that you were going through at the time?
I don't think so. I used to be a big Marvel, DC comic book fan, Batman, Spider-Man, and I used to draw a lot of comic books. And I think maybe more so from the angle of I would get lost in drawing this Spider-Man comic for like 6 hours, and those 6 hours would just fly by, and that would be a way for me to get lost for those 6 hours rather than just sort of sitting there and thinking about things.
And so what 3 words would you use to describe Perry today?
Resilient. Caring. And handsome.
Wonderful. I'd add to that powerful. Well, look, I have to say thank you. Thank you so much for sharing so authentically your story, your life, and the work that you're doing. I guess you've gifted your time and your lifetime to ensuring that less people go through what you've been through. I know that you always like to say be powerful, and so continue being powerful. I will pop the links to both your book and all your socials into this podcast. And to all my listeners and viewers, love your life and own your journey.